YouTube, it's Adam here again, doing a review of my Alienware M17x. I'm going to give you a basic overview of what it's like to own the machine and a couple of my opinions on the machine's features itself. As you can see right now, it's off. I wanted to give you guys a quick impression of the boot time of this device, so here we go. As you can tell, I've got a custom Alienware FX setup right there. Got white keyboard, red accents. You can, as always with Alienware machines, customize them to whatever liking you want as far as, rainbow colors, solid all the way through, anything you want really. While it's booting up here, I figure I'll give you a little rundown of the textures you're going to be dealing with when you're interacting with this machine. Here where your palms rest is a nice, almost solid rubber feel to the machine. It's not like the M11X, which was plastic. This has a very grippy texture to it. It feels great, actually. Does collect dust a little easily. Here we go. It's booting up as into Windows. Little background programs are starting up. As you can tell with the alien head up here, the little eyes flicker with the hard drive spinning. You got your media control keys over there. Nice spacious keyboard, full size, unlike the M11X because of this real estate. Nice distinct number keys over here. As far as the keys and how they feel, as you can tell, they're very separate, very good spacing on these keys, not like the M11X, which was right next to each other. I know I keep comparing the two, but there is a significant distance. These are raised, these are bump keys, they're not all flat to each other. They actually feel very comfortable to type with, very distinct, very easy to find the buttons. The thing I don't like about it specifically is there's a little bit of flex here. You can tell some of the other keys are moving as I'm pressing some. It's only on this side it gets a little more solid over here and picks up again over here. It's not too bad, nothing you really notice when you're gaming. It's just something where if you press really hard you may notice that the whole keyboard will flex with it. I don't know if the video can pick it up that well, but you got it. Nice features, that slot loading Blu-ray drive. You probably heard it when I turned it on. Kind of an irritating sound, but good feature nonetheless. I don't really like to go over the ports and all because I think that's kind of unnecessary. I mean, USB, Ethernet, all that crap. But one very interesting port that I've used quite a bit is this one right here. It's called the HDMI-in port. Now what that does is if something's plugged into it, your laptop here, as long as it's running, basically acts as a TV. The speakers and the screen will switch over to whatever that HDMI import is. So if you are traveling and you're someplace without a TV and you've got an Xbox, or let's say money's relatively tight because you just blew a bunch of money on a laptop and you need a TV for some other device, pop a connection into it and it'll pop right up on the screen. If you guys really want, I may do a demonstration of it later. What's really nice about it is while that's plugged in, you can actually toggle by using the one of the function keys, and I think it's F8, which is I think that one right there, and it'll actually toggle between Windows and the input. And it's really interesting, really great feature. The sound is the same. You can control the volume with the volume buttons on the laptop there. I think that's a great feature. It's come in really handy in my room where before I've had my full setup hooked up, where I had someone playing on my TV in my room and I wanted to play on my Xbox, so I hooked my Xbox up to my laptop here, and we did some dual screen gaming there, which was really fun. With this machine, I've outfitted it with 8 GB of RAM and 2 750 GB hard drives in RAID 0 for performance, which is 1.5 TB. It's pretty close to being filled. I've got about 190 gigs free right now. I've got a boatload of games on here. lots of high-end, lots of high disk usage games. I mean, Battlefield, 16, 17 gigs, Witcher, 18 gigs, Max Payne, 20-some gigs. It's monstrous games I've got on this machine. Let's see, what else? I think next I'll go over probably the underside of the laptop and then some more design features they decided to go with. Okay, here we are on the underside of the laptop. As you can tell, we've got two gigantic vents, one here and one here. Obviously one's CPU bound and one's GPU bound. We've got a nice brick of a battery up here. It's got that sweet feature of telling you how much of the percentage of the battery's filled. Don't want you to see my code up there. Obviously you've got your nameplate. My M11X doesn't have a customized nameplate because that was a refurb, but this one I bought specifically for me. Probably should have put my phone number or something else on there. You can write whatever you want and they'll also give you that sweet Alienware text there above it. Also I have some Alienware text there, I'm sure that says Alienware or something, I'm not exactly positive, but with these oh yeah, we've also got rubberized feet here. They're not very tall, granted. The cooling system in this laptop is really powerful. I'll go over some of the actual issues that's actually brought up with the design decision to have such a low internal temperature later. I mean, that was a big issue if you talked with anyone on the Notebook Review forums, which is a pretty big forum for it. But very, very aggressive cooling system in this. I mean, it keeps the temps down pretty low. Idle 30s Celsius, gaming about low 70s, high 60s. Typically, for me, after a good Battlefield match, I'll have about 68 degrees, so gotta applaud them for that. Lots of air intake, though, so this isn't something you really want to rest on your legs, because you could block these air intakes. But then again, on a desk, it doesn't really need much air intake here, just as long as it's slightly elevated. As you can tell, there's grooves here. The thing I don't like about it, the notebook feels incredibly solid over this plastic area here. Feels incredibly solid, very well built, very, very chunky, very almost expensive feeling, but still rugged. Whereas this part right here, there's a little bit of flex going on here. These thin pieces of plastic here stretch across by basically just a wire grid underneath, and it almost seems like it's a weak spot for its ruggedness. I know the machine's very, obviously expensive and you want to take good care of it, but I just wish that this felt a little more solid. Maybe if they had metal here or something, I don't know, but that could have been improved. Okay, here we are looking at the top of the machine. This is a rubberized, almost rubberized plastic. I want to say it doesn't feel like plastic. It really does feel like rubber. It's got a very grippy texture. In fact, this is the palm rest texture right here, and this isn't even as rubberized as this is. This up here feels, it almost feels like it's got a coating on it of some sort. If I zoom in real close, you can see this line right there. Whereas this is the normal plastic, and this above it, this whole area, this thick, rubberized, heavy grippiness to it. It does collect a couple fingerprints. I don't know if you can tell them in this angle here, but the fingerprints and little scratches, not real noticeable at a far glance or just looking at the machine by itself. But if it catches the light just right, you can definitely see that. Now it's actually very easy to clean. I didn't do it specifically so I could show you guys, but you just take a wet paper towel and you wipe it off, and it comes out looking actually pretty nice after you do that. Also down here is glossy plastic that catches fingerprints real well too, and that can be easily wipeable too with a soft cloth. The alien head is not lit by the backlit of the screen. It's a separate light that you can't change the color of, just so you guys can keep that in mind. If you're all about unified color, it's white, but you can change obviously your alien effects colors to being white as well. Okay, here we are looking at the screen. Just like the Alienware M11x, this entire generation of Alienware laptops has these super glossy edge-to-edge gloss screen screens here, and they smudge incredibly well. So you can see just by putting my thumbs on it, I'm probably making most of you guys cringe. I am very OCD when it comes to cleaning these things. If I catch it right, you might be able to see some of my cleaning streaks in it too. But yeah, it is glare. Obviously, that's my big light I've got up there. But man, it's really glary as well. It's a bright screen. Right now, it's in battery mode. Here, I'm gonna plug in my power cord so you can see how the brightness will be a little bit more boosted. Also, I'm using one of my darkest wallpapers for this review. There we go. Got it boosted a little bit more. It tells me it's in battery mode. I mean, in plugged in mode. But yeah, if I had this thing on a brighter wallpaper, it would totally blow out this camera, because it actually does get very bright, and that's something I gotta hand to it, is that this screen is a gorgeous screen. Despite being very glossy, you know, I can tell you can see my reflection there. It is a gorgeous screen. It's got pretty solid viewing angles, not perfect, but pretty solid. And the color reproduction is great. The range of gamut there, that color gamut is pretty high. I'm really impressed with it. The blacks can get really black, and the brights can get very bright. So I have to applaud them on the screen quality itself. But again, it's at that sacrifice of having a glossy screen. Okay, I said I would talk about the thermals of this computer a little bit. Alienware has adopted a certain set of rules and guidelines that they want all their laptops to meet, as far as not just the temperatures inside the computer, but how the computer is felt on the outside. Like when you're gaming, how hot does the keyboard get, and which areas do get hot. Now, the graphics card and the CPU are right about under here and right about under here, and they chose to have a very aggressive limit for the temperatures that they allow outside of here. So that means they have to have a very strong cooling system, and I applaud them for that. They've got a super powerful, almost in my opinion, award-winning cooling system. They keep my GTX 580, which is essentially a 100 watt an hour graphics card. They keep that thing under 70 degrees cool. Now, it on a high-end game like Battlefield, something really GPU intensive like Max Payne or Grand Theft Auto 4, my card barely gets to 70 degrees. It gets about 69 degrees Celsius, which is actually very cold for not very cold, but it's pretty cold for a graphics card, specifically if you're trying to have a bit of room for overclocking, which is great for this machine, because I can overclock this bad boy pretty high up from its stock settings. In fact, I have it so that when it boots up, it's booted up in an overclock state. Now, its core clocks, as we can see here, its default is 620 1500 memory, and obviously the shaders double the default clock of 1240. And my boots it up at 700, which would be 1400, and 1650 for memory, and that's what I normally keep it at. As you can see, it's idling at 44, 45 degrees Celsius there, and after a good game, that thing will barely reach 70, just barely. Now, to give you a frame of reference, most high-end computers like Sagers or MSI, Asus, they all employ pretty aggressive cooling systems themselves, and they typically get into the 80s, high 80s too. Sometimes they'll get, after a good overclock, they'll get to the low 90s. Now, after a good overclock, I can overclock this, as you can see here in a second, to my boosted clock here of 750, 1700, obviously 1500. And with those, I'm barely reaching 72, 73 degrees Celsius, which is a great overclock. As you can see, running NVIDIA Inspector is going to cause it to run at this clock in the P state of 0, which is the highest P state or power state. At least I think that's what it stands for, is power state. But obviously that temperature is going to be rising right there. But obviously when I close this, it's not going to be utilizing that graphics card anymore. But that's really phenomenal performance with it. However, there was one downside that's slightly been remedied if you buy a newer version of this laptop, or if if you have some of the newer versions of the BIOS, which is they had a GPU throttle, which is where they throttle back the performance of the graphics card once it meets a certain temp. So if it exceeds that temperature, then it'll throttle it down, try and cool it off, and then it'll let it go back to full performance. What that caused was hiccuping gameplay, meaning you'll be getting solid 60 frames a second a game, and then the throttle hits, and then you're getting 25 frames a second, or you're getting 14 frames a second, something really crappy, until the graphics card cools off, and then it reaches the lower temperature, then it'll throttle back up to the good speeds again. Now there's a lot of fixes for that, and granted that throttle clock wasn't around until about high 70s, like 78 degrees Celsius, so not a whole lot of people saw it, but I did see it actually once or twice. I actually ran this on a metal table, which caused the metal to heat underneath it, and that temperature from the table caused the air intake to just basically blowing hot air over a hot surface, and my temperatures got up to about 78 degrees, and then I saw that throttle. And as you can see here, I got a wooden desk, and I'm running this in the basement, so it's got cool ambient temperatures. But that is something to note. Granted, that was something that was only prevalent in the GTX 580. Now, the Nvidia GTX 675 graphics card is essentially a rebranded 580. They're core for core, shader for shader, exactly the same. It's just a different name. It's just a different series. They took the 580 one, made it the 675. So they could have the 680 be, the new card. And the 680 just came out. I do not know whether or not the 680 has a performance issue, but I'm willing to bet that the 675 does if you get it with the 675 option. But again, you have to try pretty hard to hit that temperature. I mean, that requires overclocking, again, probably covering those vents or setting on a metal flat surface. So I just want to bring that to everyone's attention, keep that in mind. But I'll give you a sneak peek as to what's coming up. I'm going to be doing some gameplay tests, and this thing is a monster. I've got this quad core in here that overclocks to 3 gigahertz on all 4 cores. I've got the 580M, I've got the 8 gigs RAM. I mean, it really is portable power with this thing. I mean, it's not very portable, it's a pretty heavy machine. Weighs just shy of 10 pounds, it's like 9 and change, I think. But taking this someplace to game with some buddies is a boatload of fun. Boosting Battlefield and a bunch of other games to max settings is quite a treat, and we're going to get into that right now. Okay, here we are in Caspian Border on Battlefield 3, my favorite map. Massive 64-player map. Got this baby maxed out graphics setting wise, just so you guys can see it. I'm going to crouch down here real quick. And the options, everything's set on ultra. Motion blur on, HBAO on. Another thing I don't have on is anti-aliasing deferred. I do have post anti-aliasing, basically FXAA. So this is maxed out settings. It's running very smoothly, no hiccups at all. Almost better than I thought this computer could run it, to be honest. I have a desktop with a GTX 560 that runs it about the same. Granted, this is with my boosted overclock on, getting very solid frame rates, high 30s, low 40s, averages around 44 frame rates a second. There's no one for me to kill here right now, but see if I can blow something up for you guys. Okay, as you can see, Battlefield's not really putting up much of a fight. I do have pre-rendered frames limited down to 1 pre-rendered frame. That, in my experience, that does help out with responsiveness and frame rate a bit, specifically with this game. Not every game, but Battlefield, yes. And it's running really great right now. Again, this is with all settings maxed at 1080p resolution. I've got a slight boost on my overclock, but really this game, specifically this map, is mostly CPU limited just based off the amount of geometry and the mesh details with all the trees and grass and everything. So even without my overclock, I'm still getting high 30s frame rate though, which is in my opinion smooth. I mean, we're not talking 60 frames a second here, but there you got it. Alright guys, here we are in Triss's tent right after some shenanigans. This is Witcher 2 Assassin of Kings, a gorgeous game that I have currently graphically maxed out except for uber sampling. I have texture memory on very large, shadows on shadow casting lights at ultra, level of detail at far, everything else maxed out or enabled. Bloom, sun shafts, motion blur. The texture is not downscaled at all. This is running at 1080p. This is on my the 580M is handling it super smooth right now, and Witcher 2 is probably one of my favorite games, one of my favorite RPGs. Lots of great interactive environments, lots of barrels to break apart and explode, lots of people to talk to. Gorgeous game, very taxing on system specs. You need something really powerful to run it, and I mean, I'm not getting blazing frame rates here just because this game never seems to want to cooperate with anyone's computer. Even my desktop has trouble running this thing at 60 frames a second, but again, like Battlefield, at times I'm getting high 30s, low 40s. Great stuff. Great game. Not a whole lot to go on about it. I've tried to do some custom settings with pre-rendered frames. That's come up with some choppy results, so I wouldn't promise that. But one thing I will note that does help make this game look better is if you turn anti-aliasing off, it turns off texture sharpening, and texture sharpening makes this game look super good. It's all this beautiful texture here that is very finely detailed, really benefits from texture sharpening. And if you go into your config file, you can turn that on, assuming you're turning anti-aliasing off. Granted, this GPU can handle it pretty well, so there's no need to turn texture sharpening on or off because it's enabled, because I have anti-aliasing enabled. But for people out there who want to turn it off for a little frame rate boost, be sure to turn texture sharpening on in your config file, because that makes the game look way better. Other than that little helpful tip, I don't really have a whole lot else. Game looks great, game runs great. Just because I've redone this machine recently, I don't have a save further on in some of the more taxing environments. I don't have it like in the forest or on the big battlefield, but I can promise you that it definitely does run over 30 frames a second in those areas, so there you go. Okay guys, I've decided to boot up Grand Theft Auto 4 because I think this game is pretty taxing on GPU and CPU at the same time. I'm literally running this game about as maxed as it can get. The one caveat is that I've turned shadows on high instead of very high, because very high shadows are pretty much unfair for any computer out there. But high shadows are totally acceptable. There's hardly any notice. In fact, sometimes I think that high shadows look better than very high, just because very high shadows are so sharp looking. These look a little more blurred out. But despite that, I've got detail, view distance, car density, everything is at 100. Everything else is set as high as it can go. I have definition off, you can toggle it with P here. because I like the motion blur. But it runs super smooth. As you can tell, the quad core, the i7-2720, is perfectly capable of handling all the city geometry. I don't know how easy it is to tell on the camera, but all the detail goes all the way to the horizon. All the dumpsters load in as far as you can see. All the reflections in the windows go as far as you can see. Everything's super smooth. I mean, this is easily over 40 frames a second here I'm getting, no matter where I go. Just so you guys know, yeah, you can run great open world games on this machine, even demanding ones like Grand Theft Auto 4. Okay, so here we are in Alan Wake. I know that this game isn't too kind on a lot of computers out there either, because of its advanced deferred rendering engine. What's kind of weird about this engine is that even though it's deferred rendering and it does support FXAA, it has MSAA enabled by default, and MSAA is a bitch when you combine it with a deferred rendering engine. So it's weird that it's on by default, but just so you guys can get a sense of my settings here, under my graphics settings, I have everything maxed out, all the draw distances maxed out, and I just turned FXAA on high and turned anti-aliasing, the regular one, MSAA, down to 2x, which is as low as it will go. It won't go to off. But I'm sure that if it did have that, it would probably run better. But right now it runs very smooth. It runs probably high 30s. It's not the best game to show frame rate, because it's got a pretty heavy motion blur that does add to the illusion that it's running smoother than it currently is. But and I'm sucking right now. I'm not really paying attention. Sorry about that. And I just cut her one. All right, well, that's it. I'm in a heavily forested sequence here, so you can tell this is about as bad as it's gonna get. Okay, guys, here's a game that needs no introduction. Of course, this is Skyrim. This isn't just Skyrim though, because that wouldn't be that impressive to show on this laptop. This is Skyrim fully modded out. I've got lighting effects enabled. I've got bump map textures, high resolution textures, static mesh improvement mods. I've got, again, my water mods. I've got fog mods. I've got spells casting light mods. I've got shadow mods. I've got a bunch of mods enabled right now, and they are kind of taxing on a normal system. Granted, as we can see here, the M17x is running it freaking awesomely right now. And it's pretty impressive stuff. Anyone who knows Skyrim well and some of the areas know that there's this infamous fog here that is kind of taxing on a lot of computer hardware, and we're gonna run right through it and see how well the computer handles it. Nice little hiccup there. But I've got lush grass mods, lush tree mods, more grass mods. I mean, I'm running a lot of blades of grass going on right here. It's running pretty well. This is probably going to be the most CPU taxing this game will ever be, is right here. Mostly because of that freaking fog too, which will mess up any system. As you can tell, the stutter is bringing the frame rate down a bit. CPU's not being very kind to it, but this is probably the only area of the game that this happens. Almost every other area of the game, it runs easily 50 frames a second, if not more. And again, I've got anti-aliasing up to 8. Got nasty spiders to deal with. that'll probably kill me because, again, spend too much time checking the graphics in my games and not playing them actually. Hey, we moderately survived that. But yeah, this is Skyrim, and again, anyone who knows that this is one of the hardest areas to run smoothly in the game. And the M17X is doing it. 1080p, max settings, fully modded out, tons of grass, tons of geometry. So, alright guys, I just wanted to wrap things up here with my M17X review, and overall just owning this machine for as long as I have and been using it as my primary portable gaming rig, I can just say that it's probably one of the greatest gaming purchases I've ever made in my life. Super rock solid performance, great cooling, great aesthetic, great feel, great weight to it. It's got a great sense of, I mean, this thing feels like it looks. It feels expensive. It feels powerful. I mean, these hinges are rock solid. This screen is thick and has got weight to it. This bad boy is, it just, you feel like you're transporting power when you're holding this thing. I know it sounds weird, but it is almost a sense of like entitlement to all the juice you get out of it, just because of its look, its feel, the money you probably will spend on it. But I'd say overall it's very much worth it. Great machine. I can't really explain what it's like until you actually have it yourself, until you hold it, until you carry it around, until you play on it, until you experience some of those frame rates. As you can see through some of the gameplay I've shown you, that this thing is no slouch. This thing has got some serious juice, and if you pair it with a really good mouse and a good network, odds are you'll probably be owning some people online just like I did, or killing goblins or whatever in Diablo or something like that. But I highly recommend it. It's just a mean looking machine, and yeah, that's about it. Alright guys, thanks for checking it out. See ya.